Welcome everyone, Christine here with my Cast Dwarf Legendary Lord rankings for Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. There are 3 Legendary Lords: Astragoth Ironhand, Drazhoath the Ashen, and Zhatan the Black. So I'm going to rank them from the worst to the very best. At least what I think is the worst to the very best in terms of their Immortal Empires campaigns. At number 3, we have Astragoth Ironhand. Now, he's certainly very cool in the exosuit that he has, and I think he is going to be the favorite for a lot of people in Immortal Empires, but he is actually the weakest of the Legendary Lords of the Chaos Dwarves. There's a number of factors from starting position to faction effects that make him the weakest. He does get 10% conclave influence from all sources, but that translates into a fairly minuscule amount early on in his campaign, because what it means is you're just basically getting one more with the sacrifice to Zarnagrund, and if you have 10 settlements, or roughly 10 settlements, give or take, or if you're basically gaining 10 conclave influence passively, you'll gain one more. Not really a substantial benefit. Can be useful later on in the campaign, but not really that great. 10% research rate, also not particularly great because a lot of the Chaos Dwarf research is actually fairly fast. So just having 10% research is not really going to add a lot to the Chaos Dwarves, especially because a lot of the good research is locked behind resources and is instant. So for instance, if I wanted to do martial training, it would take me 2 turns for Call to War, and then the martial training itself would only be 1 turn. The only good faction-wide effect that he does have is the 2 control in all provinces. This helps him with maintaining a high level of control, which means that he won't lose as many laborers per turn. But it's the only useful faction effect that Astragoth does have. Now, in terms of his Lord effects, he gets 5% casualty replenishment, which is nice, but casualty replenishment isn't too big of a deal for the Chaos Dwarves. 15% ward save for Bull Centaur, renders units, and mechanical overdrive ability as a passive ability, which gives him more base weapon damage and melee attack. So he's certainly good in melee. He's very mobile on the battlefield, by the way, and he does have a combination of melee and spells, and his spells are pretty strong because he gets both Killing Fire and Kindle Flame. So he's got the combination of Lord of Shoot and Lord of Fire, and you kind of want to focus him on both magic and some melee ability if you're playing as him. Now, in terms of his special skill line, he gets Winds of Magic benefits, diplomacy benefits with basically chaos, including Chaos Dwarves, so it's nice that he's overcoming the aversion, the innate aversion that Chaos Dwarves have towards each other. He gets an armament cost reduction for Bull Centaur units, upkeep for Bull Centaurs, and armor-piercing weapon damage. So you can have more of these guys on the campaign map. Then Piercing Intellect, which seems a bit weird as a skill, considering he already starts with this Burning Wrath ability. I'm not quite entirely certain what this is really about. I mean, I guess if you're not going to go in his magic tree, it makes sense, but still. Then he gets Infernal Lord, +2 hero capacity for all heroes, and Hero and Lord recruit rank. Out of all the skills here, I would say this is the most important one. Yes, improving Bull Centaurs and giving them more save is all well and good, but being able to get more heroes and increasing the Hero and Lord recruit rank can be very substantial. And then he gets Winds of Magic benefit for the Hellhammer ability in his final skill line. Hellhammer is this particular spell. It can do quite a bit of damage in a fight, small forward moving area of effect, and that's strong versus multiple units. He has 2 quest items, the Black Hammer of Hashut and the Stone Mantle. The Stone Mantle gives him quite a lot of physical resistance and ward save, as well as a miscatch chance benefit. The Black Hammer of Hashut gives him a pretty powerful weapon that also buffs your control, but he doesn't have an item set, unfortunately, in his campaign. Now, starting position-wise, he starts with a Bull Centaur Tarok. He also starts with 2 blunderbusses, which is great because that's your initial capacity, so you don't have to build a barracks to get them, as well as 1 unit of Chaos Dwarf Warriors. So on turn 1, you can recruit another unit of Chaos Dwarf Warriors, and you can also get a Taurus, a great Taurus, because he starts with the structure from the very beginning. But here's the thing, you're only going to get that Taurus, and then you're going to sell the building because you don't have enough armaments, nor will you have enough armaments to be able to increase the capacity for the Great Taurus early on, or for the renders, even with the benefits you get. So it's best to sell it because it'll give you a lot of early game armament. So it's a nice economic benefit because you do start with this structure. And it is nice to start with the Great Taurus and some renders and a Bull Centaur Tarok. But here's the problem in Astragoth's campaign. His starting position is the one that puts him on the most direct course of collision with Grimgor. And the thing about Chaos Dwarves is you don't just care about your own selfish desires in your campaign. The best thing you can do in the campaign is try and protect the other Chaos Dwarves. Because protecting the other Chaos Dwarves means that they'll get Tower of Tsar seats, which means you'll get faction-wide effects from the districts if they do so, and it will make it easier to confederate them and gain a massive empire. The problem with Astragoth's position is, while his initial province is pretty good, and it's fairly safe, and he does have a landmark over here, this one, the Ancient Inner City, which gives him hero recruitment for Bull Centaurs, Taroks, in all provinces, and upkeep for Bull Centaur units. He's really about those Bull Centaurs, isn't he? While he does certainly have quite a few benefits with that, the problem is it's just a bit awkward to expand from here. What are we going to do once you take the province? Are we going to move south against the Silver Pinnacle again and the Dripping Fangs? Well, that puts you on a collision course with Karakadrin. Another issue is that, let's say you move east. This is what I've done in Astragoth's campaign. You move east, you take Saber Mountain, you take Ice Spear, hopefully before Kolek, but then you encounter potentially the major problem, I'd argue, that Kolek might take one of these settlements early on, which if he takes Ice Spear before you, that will create a lot of issues for you when dealing with Grimgor. Now, you're kind of safe against Grimgor because Grimgor would have to go through the Falls of Doom to attack you, or through Saber Mountain, and who knows, maybe if you take Saber Mountain and sell it to Kolek, you might be able to get into a position where you can get a military alliance with Kolek and try and have him help you against Grimgor. But it is a pretty harsh situation against Grimgor, and there's an element of RNG. Like, if you can take Ice Spear here very quickly, then that is a great situation for you to take advantage of, right, to fight Grimgor. But if you can't, you're going to have some fairly serious issues in your campaign against Grimgor, unfortunately. Now, I was able to take control over this entire province. The reason you want to take over this entire province, by the way, is to be able to unlock unit recruitment so you can get the full stack before you're facing Grimgor. You do have the army able to defeat him, but it is certainly a harsh and brutal battle. You do have some good units, the blunderbusses, the Bull Centaur renders, of course, and the Great Taurus that you're going to be able to recruit very, very quickly in your campaign, but there's still going to be some issues with that. And you can't ignore Grimgor, so you certainly have a very difficult early game that can go sideways very quickly. And if you ignore Grimgor, you're certainly going to regret it in your campaign. Every Chaos Dwarf campaign basically boils down to how can they deal with Grimgor in the fastest and most effective way possible. Now, Astragoth can deal with Grimgor very quickly, but is kind of like a dice roll. It can also go south very, very quickly as well in his campaign. Like, his campaign can go brilliantly, but his campaign can also go really badly. Another thing I would say, though, about Astragoth, when I'm looking at his campaign benefits over here, like, Lord-wise, the Infernal Lord is the only one that's really going to matter in your campaign. The diplomacy is nice, undeniably so, but it's not too impactful. You've played the most as Drazhoath and Zhatan, and I haven't had issues with, like, the Chaos factions and diplomacy with them, so kind of feels a bit redundant in that. It is helpful. His faction effects just aren't really that great, I would argue. And while his items are good, not having a set bonus kind of ruins that. Like, I would say Astragoth is far better to confederate as a legendary lord, to put him with a Bull Centaur army, than it is to actually play him in his campaign, because it is, as I said, a harsh early campaign, and your empire building potential is actually limited with only the control benefit providing you a substantial one. It is nice to have that casualty replenishment benefit, though, in his army from the very start, but there are plenty of ways of getting casualty replenishment as the Chaos Dwarves. Like, there's a seat in the Tower of Tsar that can give you casualty replenishment, there's research that can give you casualty replenishment, Gordas that can give you casualty replenishment. Like, that's a great thing about the Chaos Dwarves. They have plenty of ways of getting casualty replenishment outside of relying, like, on some Lord skill or Hero skill. So I guess the way I would see Astragoth is kind of like he's as generic of a cast dwarf legendary lord as you go. At number 2, we have Zhatan the Black, who starts with the Death Shrieker rocket launcher. Now, having an artillery piece as a starting unit is pretty substantial. He also starts with 2 Chaos Dwarf warrior units and a unit of Hobgoblin Cutthroats and Hobgoblin Wolf Riders. The Cutthroats are kind of useless, but starting with 2 Chaos Dwarf warriors is pretty nice, as is starting with an artillery piece and also having magic through the Demon Smith Sorcerer of Fire. I do prefer having magic on heroes as opposed to lords, because it's much easier to just get the powerful spells as opposed to having to make those decisions as a lord. So Zhatan certainly has a great situation over here. He starts with 2 settlements, though unfortunately his capital is only tier 1, so in order to unlock the good units it's going to take a while, but still you certainly can get access to those units. Now, faction-wide effects, he gets a recruitment cost reduction to artillery by 50%. That is substantial, very substantial. And he also gets a maximum number of active convoys +1. So he's going to have more convoys running around than anyone else in his entire campaign. There is a major issue in his campaign, but I want to be clear, in terms of lord effects, in terms of skills, in terms of faction effects, Zhatan could genuinely be number 1, with the exception of one major issue. He does get +1 local recruitment capacity, and he gets 15% casualties captured post-battle. So the way to view Zhatan is he's the labor master. He'll always have the most amount of labor of any of the Chaos Dwarf legendary lords in his campaign because of the caravans that he starts with and the fact that he's capturing more casualties post-battle. Then he gets a bunch of benefits in battle through his special skill line, like brutality of Tsar, which gives him a lot of armor piercing and bonus versus large. Pretty useful, the armor piercing against Grimgor. More casualties post-battle, income from post-battle loot, and labor gained from post-battle. So you're certainly gaining a lot of labor with Zhatan when you're fighting battles with him. He then gets regeneration, which is always sweet to have. Ward save, General Tsar, so he's reducing the upkeep of his army by 10%, and he's getting 10% casualty replenishment, which is, while it's certainly not a lord effect and special skill, it's better than what Astragoth does have. But I did mention it with Astragoth. Casualty replenishment is not necessarily too big of a deal, because you'll always get Gordos pretty early on who will give you casualty replenishment, but certainly 10% is nothing to sneeze at. Then, this is where he gets a bit substantial. He gets 15 armor for all units in his army, +5 leadership, +5 melee defense. He will have a pretty powerful army, especially in the early game, which is always the critical stage of any particular campaign. And then finally gets the Laughing Killer ability, which reduces enemy leadership, gives him perfect vigor, and gives him an additional 50 armor piercing weapon damage as well. He does get free items with an item set as well that gives him 5% campaign movement range, character aura leadership effect, and leadership aura. The armor itself is kind of hit and miss. I mean, it doesn't have ward save, but it has like an unused ward save effect with the armor here. The more he takes damage, the more damage resistance he's getting, and he gets 20 armor and 10 melee defense. Then he gets the Obsidian Axe, which gives him more damage and melee attack as he's killing enemies in a fight. So the way you want to use Zhatan is to send him in a fight, kill a bunch of weaker units, build this up, and then use him to snipe lords. 100 armor piercing weapon damage, 25% weapon strength, and sundering attacks, which reduce enemy armor. Then he gets, this is a bit ridiculous when you add it all up. This guy gets 25% casualty replenishment between his skill line and his item. Like, the Chaos Rune Shield is pretty insane. It has 10% ward save, 15% missile resistance, and the passive ability, the Chaos Rune Shield, which makes you immune to contact effect. So, in the skirmish, Zhatan is the worst legendary lord of the Chaos Dwarfs. On the campaign map, he beats the crap out of them in a direct fight. So all of these things are substantial, starting with 2 settlements, having an outpost already built so you don't have to waste the money. Though unfortunately you do have to build a strip mine yourself, which is a bit unfortunate. It would be great if he does start with the strip mine, but you can't have everything. Here's the major problem with Zhatan, and here's the major reason why I'm not ranking him number 1, because I could, genuinely so. Like, his lord effects, his skill line could rank him number 1. But here's the issue. He's going the wrong way. So he starts with the Valkyrie and the Granite Spikes, and he's at war with Lothar over here in the north, the northern castway, the northeastern castways. So he wants to expand here. There's some really substantial benefits over here in the Iron Storm. For instance, battle healing cap, upkeep -5% for artillery, 50 armaments per turn. Pretty good stuff over there, right? In the Bloodwind Keep. But the issue is, you're always going to have to deal with Grimgor. And you're pretty close to Grimgor as Zhatan. But at the same time, your early game, instead of just marching your entire army west from the very beginning to just directly come in contact with Grimgor, you're going to march east and then have to turn around to deal with him, which creates a lot of issues. You're going to waste a lot of time in this campaign. And another tension point is dealing with Grimgor is not necessarily so easy, and you also have the problem that you do want to eliminate the northern provinces for your short campaign victory condition, but your long campaign victory condition requires you to eliminate the dwarves. Now, you still have to confederate Zarnagrund. That's going to take some time, so it's not necessarily a big concern there, right? And you just have to eliminate Miao Ying. You don't actually have to fight the campaign in Cafe, though it could be something to conquer all of Cafe after you deal with Grimgor. But yeah, just a lot of issues that are going to be created in his early game, because he has to move east to eliminate Lothar, then he has to turn around, march west, then he has to also the problems of Village and the Imperial Warden. So a number of issues to deal with in this campaign. I think this campaign would certainly be very good. It would be number one if he started in the Bloodwind Keep and was moving west towards Valerie and the Granite Spikes. That would be a lot better. But instead, we have to move east. Now, there is a bit of a benefit in that you do start with the friendly relations with Kolic Suneater, and you also have a non-aggression pact. So you do have some advantages, and you can certainly use your good relations with Kolic, especially if you sell him a territory like Blizzard Peak. Like, maybe one of the best things to do in this campaign would not even necessarily defeat the army, but just directly turn to the west, take Blizzard Peak, get the defensive alliance with Kolic, then march east. When Grimgor declares war on you, he's also going to declare war on Kolic. That would be an idea if you can manage to take Blizzard Peak, but chances are Kolic is going to beat you to it, so it's a dicey proposition regardless of it. Maybe one of the things you could do early on if you wanted to maximize that would be to get a Lord over here in the Grand Spikes, but regardless of the situation, Zhatan's early game is always going to be a mess just because of where he's pointing towards and what he has to deal with in his campaign, as opposed to the big green ugly bastard over here that you will inevitably have to deal with it. So it's a good campaign. There's a lot of potential. If you overcome that early game, there's a lot of potential in this campaign. You can have a really powerful economy, because that's what laborers are. They give you influence, they give you money, they give you control. They basically vastly improve your economy because you build things faster. You can get more materials, which help you with everything. You can also use them to speed production. You can literally sell them for money. So that's why the labor benefit that Zhatan has is so very important for a powerful campaign. And also just starting with an artillery unit that's good against both field units and walls is also a very substantial benefit. Finally, and number one, we have Drazhoath the Ashen, the commander of the Black Fortress. He starts with a unit of Infernal Guard with Fireglaves, one unit of Kasdorf Blunderbusses, and one unit of Kadai Fireborn. Now, the Kadai Fireborn are pretty strong, but they are demons, so if they start crumbling combat, they are going to go down. But they can do a lot of damage. And not starting with Kasdorf Warriors isn't really an issue, because you'll just be able to recruit them very easily. In fact, here I just spend my initial armaments to just increase capacity, because you have a faction-wide benefit to reduce armament cost to increase unit capacity. So he's all about getting as many elites units in his campaign as possible. He also starts with an Infernal Castellan. Though he may not necessarily have, I would argue, the strongest starting army, but he can certainly get the strongest early game army of all the Kasdorfs, minus the fact that he doesn't have artillery in his campaign, unfortunately. Now, the Black Fortress starts as a tier 2 settlement, and you also start with the prototype Mega Mortar, which is pretty substantial, because you get the Dreadquake battery ability in basically your initial province, which does a lot of damage. So you start with a garrison artillery piece from the very beginning. That is pretty substantial. That is a substantial starting situation, and you can really use it to annihilate the greenskins you start at war with. Over here very, very easily. Then get a bunch of elite units, like just get free cast Dwarf warriors, or a combination of the correct cast Dwarf warriors with great weapons and regular cast Dwarf warriors, and then get a Hobgoblin hut or mustering camp to be able to start getting Hobgoblins very, very quickly. Another thing about Drazhoath is he's got quite a few landmarks next to him, to be very clear. Like if I toggle the Fog of War, he has 2 in his initial province, the one in the Black Fortress and the one in Karum, that gives you maximum cargo capacity and income from trade tariffs by 50%. That's pretty ridiculous. The Black Fortress itself gives you Infernal Castellan in all provinces, hero crew rank, minus 10% upkeep for Infernal Guard units. So he's all about those Infernal Guard, which makes sense because they're based in the Black Fortress. Then he also has the Tower of Gorgorth pretty close to him, which gives him volcanic deposits. Then the Demon Stump, which gives him the Bloodthirster prison, which gives him Demonsmith hero recruitment in all provinces. So he's got quite a few benefits in his campaign in his start position, but he's kind of going to need all of them, or a fairly substantial amount of them. There's also the landmark in the Bone Gulch in Emmerich's starting province. So all of that is great, right? All those benefits are pretty substantial. There is another hidden benefit in Drazhoath's campaign, which makes him really powerful on the campaign map. To be clear, you will need this campaign strength, but I kind of like a campaign that is hard but gives you all the tools and resources to succeed. See, the Black Fortress is a major pit stop for caravans, and one of the things that will happen is caravans will park themselves right next to it. So when they do, you can just go here, recruit a lord in the Black Fortress, and just attack the caravan that's parked right outside and get truckloads of money, and crucially, truckloads of laborers. It's all well and good to say Zhatan gets a lot of laborers in his campaign, sure, but Zhatan is also the only one that can't actually benefit from raiding Cafe and caravans. It's not necessarily a complete downside, because declaring war on all of Cafe in a cast dwarf position can have its own downsides, of course, but from an early game perspective, Drazhoath has the most early game advantages of any legendary lord of the cast dwarves, and he certainly scales up pretty strongly with that armament output and that armament cost benefit. Then, in terms of his lord effects and special skill line, he gets the Tyrant of the Black Tower with 10% campaign movement range, minus 25% upkeep for Kadai units, and the passive ability Dark Renown, which gives units with Contempt within 35 meters, 8 melee attack. So he's all about Kadai and melee units. Then he gets research rate, not really important, but he does get the construction time and construction cost for all buildings in the province he's in, so that's pretty sweet. Go in the province, take the territory, and start building it up. You'll do it cheaper. Minus 25% armament cost for increasing capacity on Infernal Guard and Infernal Ironsworn units. Minus 15% upkeep for those units in his army, and 15 bonus for his infantry. Quite a good amount of power. He gets 10% income from cities and 10% raw material output. On top of the fact he's already improving his raw material output. This guy has an empire in terms of economic output. Like, Zhatan is better because he can get a lot of laborers and he's running those caravans, but holy crap, and just like terms of passive income, not the caravan or laborers, yeah, Drazhoath has Zhatan beat, I'd argue. Then he gets an armament cost benefit with Kadai units, weapon strength, physical resistance in his army. Then the Ashen, which gives him barrier, hit points, wind recovery time. Wind recovery doesn't matter, but barrier makes him very, very substantial in a battle. And then he gets Winds of Magic cost benefit for the Flames of Asgore. Now, the Flames of Asgore are over here in the Lore of Hashut, which he has access to. And it's one of the better spells in the Lore of Hashut, if not the best spell in the Lore of Hashut. It's kind of ridiculously strong at the moment. So just having a benefit to Winds of Magic means you can cast them more. What's kind of interesting with both Drazhoath and Astragoth is you really actually want to get their magic skill, which is something that you usually don't do with hybrid legendary lords with magic, because while the magical benefits aren't nice, it's probably better to focus on their melee skill line. But their melee skill line in this case is limited, so it's better to focus on the magic in their case and just do a lot of damage with it, especially at Drazhoath in his campaign. Now, his campaign situation is pretty good in a lot of ways, but it's also complicated. Complicated in the sense that you're almost inevitably going to end up at war with both Emmerich and Tretch, and you may end up at war with Gorst. You can wipe them out, but it's certainly a complicated situation to deal with all of them. But you can, and you'll actually walk over them with no problem. Like if they try and invade the Black Fortress, just unleash the Dreadquake Mortar building over here. When you wipe them out, just get rid of it, or even get rid of it early on to get a lot more money in your campaign. And then make an alliance with Gorst or Greases, dependent on which of them has weakened each other. Like if you see Greases winning, and if you are playing a cast dwarf, it's likely Greases is going to be winning, because Grimgor's not going to go for Greases, which he usually does. He's instead going to go for you. Now, this is the biggest problem in Drazhoath's campaign, far and away. He can easily beat Emmerich and Tretch, that's no problem. And one of the tension points in Astragoth's campaign and Zhatan's campaign is Drazhoath can't actually win as an AI, controlled by the AI, or he will struggle to win and achieve anything in his campaign if he's being played by AI, just because of the many enemies he has. Like, pretty much all the factions around here hate you. Like, the Ogres hate you, not a lot, but they will declare war on you. The Ogres hate you, Gorst hates you, Cafe to the east hates you, the castors over here in the Tower of Gorgoth are not your friends. Tretch has a lot more than -25 actually, because he actually gets pissed because you wipe out the Darkland Orcs. Like, apparently Tretch gets along well with the Darkland Orcs, so you wiping them out means inevitable war with Tretch Craventail, and obviously you are going to wipe them out. So lots of enemies, lots of fighting, but I think it makes for a great campaign just having the resources needed to wipe these guys out. But of course, the issue that's going to exist in this campaign is you're not in a position like Zhatan or Astragoth to be able to deal with Grimgor early. So when Grimgor hits you, and he will hit you, that is inevitable. Grimgor might as well just be Thanos declaring that he is inevitable, but unlike Thanos, he actually is inevitable. And when Grimgor hits you, he's not going to hit you with the gentle free stacks that Zhatan or Astragoth might have to deal with. Yes, free stacks is gentle for Grimgor. No, he's going to hit you with 4, with better units, with regiments of renown, with a high level. He's going to massacre you in a fight if you're not careful. So it is a brutal campaign, but you have all the tools and all the ability to succeed in it. So I certainly think Drazhoath is the best. He gets a lot of money because of the cafe and caravans. He gets a lot of labor. He has a bunch of economic benefits in his campaign. Like, from a pure empire builder campaign, right? If it was just in isolation, I would say Zhatan is the best. But when you add in the start position, the dynamics of the campaign, and just the fact that Drazhoath has a more logical expansion path as opposed to Zhatan, then yeah, Drazhoath is the best of the cast dwarf legendary lords from my personal perspective. That's just how it is at the moment. Maybe I just have a soft spot for campaigns where they might be hard and you have to fight a lot of enemies early on, but if you succeed, then you should be able to succeed. You become really dominant, and that's absolutely the case in Drazhoath. Having a strong early game with Drazhoath absolutely has, far stronger than Zhatan or Astragoth, means a lot more power later on in your campaign. I think Astragoth's campaign benefits, it's great for Bull Centaurs, not so important for anything else, I'll be honest. I mean, the Lord and Heroic rank, sure, it's nice, it's sweet, it's beneficial. But enjoy dealing with Grimgor if you're playing as Astragoth, because, as I said, it can go sideways. Less chance of that if you're playing Zhatan. As Drazhoath, hit or miss, right? Depends on how your decisions were made. You have to be careful when you're playing Drazhoath's campaign, I'd argue. But the rewards certainly are there. Questine here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.